Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Big D Podcast. Before I announce today's special guest, please subscribe, like, share, and whatever you want with the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page where you can see all the latest and greatest. We've got a 7-time Olympic swimmer join the podcast next week, so check it out. So please check it out because I promise you will be impressed and in awe of what I've got to share. On the line from Boulder, Colorado this afternoon is Karis Jochen. Karis, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yep, that's correct. Thank you.
Karis was a runner competing in a variety of events at Texas A&M from 2013 to 2018, correct?
That is correct.
So, Karis, my first question to you is, when did you get your first pair of running shoes?
Oh, goodness. I guess it depends on what how you define running shoes. Whenever I was in elementary school, we got one pair of tennis shoes at the beginning of every school year, and I probably wore those one pair to school every single day. And then the one time a year we had to run the mile for the presidential fitness test, I wore those exact same shoes to run in. But I didn't get my first pair of shoes dedicated to running only probably until middle school cross country. And at the time, my mom was a runner in her own right. And she said Asics was the only thing to get. And so my first pair of dedicated running shoes was for 7th grade cross country, a pair of Asics Nimbus.
Yeah, and thinking back to those shoes and how the difference between tennis shoes and the aerodynamic running shoes, it probably made your cross country time go down a couple minutes, right?
For sure, for sure.
So, what's the earliest running memory?
My earliest running memory is probably in elementary school. There was a fundraiser event where it was a road race at the elementary school. My mom was doing it with me, and I don't even remember how long the race was, but there was an option to go shorter or longer. And at the time, I hated running, but my mom was a runner and it was for charity. And so she encouraged me to do it. And we got to the critical fork where you had to choose if you were to go short or long. And my mom asked me what I wanted to do. And I was adamant that I wanted to go the short route. And she said, fine. And then she turned and went the long route. And I just stood there. It's so shocked that my mom wasn't going to follow me. And so I took the short route that day. But I think that taking the short route, I realized that it didn't make me feel very good about myself that I finished so much earlier before my mom because she had chosen the harder one. And I think that was actually a really crafty learning moment for my mom to say, okay, you can take the shortcut in life, but you have to live with the guilt or the consequences. And I did. I didn't like how it made me feel afterwards.
You didn't like mom embarrassing you in front of your friend, in front of your peeps, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, what led you to try running in middle school?
It was really just a way to stay in shape for soccer. I was a competitive soccer player until my sophomore year of high school, and so running cross, and I played center mid, and so that involved just a lot of conditioning. And so my mom was very adamant that if I wanted to meet my soccer goals, staying fit was important. And so she really encouraged me to run cross country because she knew that it would help serve my my soccer dreams at the time.
Would you run more in a soccer game or in a cross country meet?
That is a great question. I have no idea. I Yeah, I wish we knew at the time the running or Garmin watches, Fitbits, those were a thing, but I wish that I had the data for all of those soccer games at the time because I didn't have to trick. I mean, I didn't go to cross country practice very often in middle school. I usually just went twice a week and then showed up to meets and was usually first or second in middle school, basically off of my soccer training, I wasn't a superstar in middle school, but for our local meets would usually win them without going to practice. So I was obviously in pretty decent shape just from soccer alone. So that is a great question.
Yeah, you imagine what you would have done if you would have focused solely on soccer or on cross country. You could have been like first in your regional state, right?
Yeah, maybe. Well, so that which is an interesting insight, probably, but would I still like running and have the passion for running that I do today, now 15 years later? Probably not. I think that letting my body and mind come to running on its own is probably one of the reasons why at 26 years old I still think that I'm young in my running career.
Yeah, sometimes you can keep us going. So, did you have any running role models?
Probably I probably didn't have any running role models on the national stage until my senior year of high school. And by that time, I had already dedicated myself to running and decided that running was my sport. Because I was in a high school 2000, I graduated 2013. So Instagram was a thing by the end of my high school career, but it wasn't it wasn't a big thing. It was still up and coming. And so we really weren't aware of what everyone was doing across the country as prevalent as high school students are now. And so growing up, my first running model was my mom. And she didn't race while I grew up, but she ran Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, working full time as a engineer and being a just badass mom. And she it was just her dedication and consistency that I really implemented or sought to follow, because it didn't matter if she had to wake up at 4:30 before driving to Houston to make a meeting. She was getting her run in because that's what she did. And so I think that seeing that dedication growing up, she was definitely my role model.
Yeah. So, what's the best? So, what's the best bit of running advice your mom gave you?
Um, She didn't often give me running advice with her words. It was more her actions. And kind of how I alluded to before, I think it was just that you show up every day with a no excuses attitude. If if you said you were going to run today, it doesn't matter how you get that run in or what the conditions are outside what the rest of your life looks like. You make time for the things that are important for you, and so you make time for that run. And so seeing that no excuses attitude, I think, instilled a resiliency in me growing up.
And so now we head to your college experience. So, you chose Texas A&M. Why the Aggies?
Yeah, so it was several things. I looked at a lot of schools. You're allowed five officials whenever you're in high school, and I took all five to different schools across the country. Only two Texas schools, Texas A&M and then Rice University in Houston. The rest were on the East Coast, on the West Coast, really wanted to get a good feel of what the options were. And at the time, academics were and are still very important to me because I know I'm a lifelong learner. I love using my brain as much as I do my legs. And so ensuring that I was going to a school where I would be happy with the progress I would make with both my brain and my legs was very important to me. So I really liked the business program that I was looking at A&M. They had a nice honors program. But then the track and field team at A&M was unlike any other track and field team I saw across the country. Coach Pat Henry and all of his assistant coaches at the time have such a such a good dynamic with each other and with the athletes. It's really a team environment where on my official, I was speaking to the jumps coach and the sprints coach and the throwers coach, and you could tell that they were all invested in all of the athletes as people. And so even though I would never have the jumps coach come to one of my practices, he knew what I was doing and he knew how I was racing, and I would walk into the track offices and we would talk to each other. So I really loved the family and team environment that the coaching staff and Coach Henry had created at Texas A&M.
Yeah, good family creating and a good honors program would make any parent and athlete happy, right? So I know one thing that would have made your mom happy was winning SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year.
That is true. That is true.
So if you think back to your college days, what was the favorite? What was your favorite event to run?
In track, the 10K for sure, but even more so than the 10K, I loved cross country.
Seems like a lot of collegiate or ex-collegiate runners love cross country. Why?
Yeah, I think that there's something so raw about cross country that that brings all runners back to why they first fell in love with running, which is often just the sheer feeling of pushing yourself, not caring what the time was, but getting the most out of yourself on the day. And whenever you get to track and everything is so measured and there's so many stopwatches and things get tactical, that definitely has valid. Don't get me wrong, I love track, but it's very more focused on external validation versus cross country, where it's really you can't look at a cross country race in a time and say how fit you are. And so that gives a person just the freedom to go as deep into the pain cave as they can on that day. And there's something so raw about that I think is just beautiful and really connects a runner to both the ground and their history with running and why they first started running. I truly think that society in general, road races are great because it's closer to cross country than anything else that um, to the community can experience. But I think that there should be a movement of getting more cross country races available to the public. If people knew just what running on a groomed like grass through the woods felt like, I think that I think people would love it, and you could get elite races going on as part of it. I think that would be an awesome movement.
How about Hey, Karis, maybe you should ask the IOC to put in cross country for the next 17 Olympic Games, right?
Oh my gosh, I think I don't know a person who would say that it's not a brilliant idea. You could have drones going through the cross country course, recording all the runners and everything. Like it could look like a little Hunger Games out there. I mean, not aside from the whole like murdering aspect of the Hunger Games, but you get my drift. I think people would love it.
And put a few GoPros on a couple athletes. Oh,
Yes, would love it. Put some video cameras on their bibs, get all different angles.
yeah, and then have like a coaches camp. Oh, it'd be so much fun. Like have like a 6K for the women and 8K for the men, right?
I think that no, I think they should do 10K for both.
Ooh, make it a little, well, yeah, for the Olympics, just make it a little better, little more exciting, right?
Yeah, cross country is strength. Like, I'm definitely a proponent for 10K for both men and women.
So, if you, so looking back on what your college success, and obviously, you were at finished top 10 in multiple SEC championships, but what happened 2016, 2017, where you basically missed most, if not all, of the year?
Yeah, so that was the first year that I experienced hamstring tendinopathy, which is I know a lot of runners now have experienced that. At the time, I had never heard of it and also didn't even know that that's what I was suffering from. But I had an aching pain in the high hamstring, basically right where you sit, and the tendons in both of my hamstrings were basically just shredded at the time, and I really struggled to go for a while. For a long while I could run through it. It just, as the pace got faster, I really struggled to lift my knees up, and so I couldn't turn my legs over. But then training through it eventually got to the point where I couldn't run and had to admit like I needed to shut my body down and figure out what was going on. And so that was the first time that I experienced that, and really just stopped running for a good 7+ months in order to see if that would help heal my hamstrings. I did eventually return to do a 5th year at A&M, but it was only by um, working with the Texas A&M athletic trainer, Saul Luna, every single day diligently, that I was able to return to running and compete my final season for A&M. And without his help and he's still to this day the most skilled body worker, athletic trainer, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever met. And that's coming from living in Boulder, Colorado. I saw him at least 2 hours every day, and he was able to get me to finish the season. But it was by my hamstrings never fully recovered while I was in college.
Yeah, let me tell you, we've all dealt with injuries. I mean, a year and a half ago, I dealt with a stretch fracture, and it was so annoying.
Yeah, it's we runners, we really push our bodies to the breaking point sometimes. It's definitely a learning experience you wish that we wouldn't have to go through, but being so driven, um, most of us come across it eventually.
So, looking back on your college days, and two women who basically penetrated the leaderboard almost every major meet were Karissa, Schweizer, and Nikki Hiltz. How much fun was it racing against them?
Yeah, so I really didn't get much experience racing Nikki. Um, because she was more of a 1,500-meter runner, and I on the track always did 10K. Karissa, I did race in cross country, but I don't we were in the same races, but I don't feel like we ever really raced each other. My best year was my junior year before I started struggling with my hamstrings. And at that time, she really hadn't come out onto the national scene. And then by the time that she did come onto the national scene, I started experiencing my hamstring issues. So I wasn't running. And then whenever I did start coming running, she was so far ahead on the national scene. And I was just trying to hang on and make it to the next day of training. And so our times overlapped, but I don't feel like we ever really raced each other.
Well, it's more like you didn't race with both of you at 100%. When Karissa was this
Right.
rising star, and you were just struggling, just wondering if I could make it through this training session.
Right, exactly.
So, did you think that either one of them would become a successful runner? Because I mean, both of them made World Championship finals in Doha a year plus ago.
Yeah, that's a good question. I so I would honestly say no, but that's not because I put a limit on their talent or their capacity, but more because I just didn't really think about it. I think that every woman in American distance running from the 15, no, shoot, the 800 all the way to the marathon over the past 5 years, if you want to say, I mean, longer than that, but really, the past 5 years has just exceeded everyone's expectations. And so, I never took it as I never thought about it as personally their lack of talent. It's just everyone across the board in American distance running, or every woman I'm specifically talking about, has just really stepped up their game, and it's been incredible and so inspiring to watch. I couldn't be happier for both of their successes, and it is really cool to think about my time as a collegiate athlete, though I did have my own struggles, to know that at full form I was in the mix of things.
Yeah, so now after you left college, you work as a data analyst looking at athletes. Could you explain your work?
Yeah, so right now I'm in graduate school for data analytics. And so it's really just acquiring the skills to use different platforms, whether it's SAS or Jump or Python coding or R Studio. I'm really just trying to accumulate different skills to analyze data so that once I graduate, I can work in an industry or for a company that analyzes the data that interests me, whether it be athlete specific data or health data. I'm not sure what opportunities I'll have in front of me, but that's really the pathway I would like to go, is to be able to go into the athletic industry. I think would be so fun.
And where you're getting this master's degree? Boulder, I'm guessing.
No, so I live in Boulder, but Texas A&M has a virtual program, and they were virtual before COVID. So thankfully, whenever COVID hit last year, um, I know a lot of schools, colleges, high schools, everyone struggled to transition to online. But because my program was already virtual, we were already set up to handle it. And so I have to Zoom into class several times a week at specific times and be active in my participation. So it's not online where it's on at my own pace. It really is just like normal school, except for it's through a computer screen rather than going in person.
As someone who did his master's program online, I can attest to what you're going through right now. So speaking of the pandemic, how has training changed for you since it hit this time last year?
How is what
How
changed?
has training changed for you since the pandemic began?
Yeah, interesting question. I probably, so my training schedule has not been dictated necessarily by COVID, but more by what my body, the timeline it's been on. So as we discussed earlier, I dealt with hamstring tendinopathy my last 2 years of college. And then the first year post collegiately, I was still dealing with it, just dealing with the consequences of pushing through to make it through that final college season. But then I eventually got healthy and had about 13 months of healthy running where I finished in top 3 at a USA championship and qualified for the Olympic trials with the half marathon. So I had a pretty good a good 13-month stint of running, considering I had missed much of the previous 2 years. But then this past April, so only a few weeks after the country shut down, on a long run, the same tendon, which we now think never fully healed and was going to it was going to happen anyway, just tore away from the bone. And so I ended up having to have surgery this past October. So I'm now, it's been almost a year, and I'm just now starting to see glimpses of light post surgery, but I'm expected to make a full recovery and return to running with no issues. I just need to be patient and let my body heal at its own time.
So you're not currently running right now. You're only using the. I saw your tweet about how the elliptical should be an Olympic sport, right?
It should. I wish if it was an Olympic sport right now, I'm very confident I would be in contention to be on the USA team. That has been my go-to training mechanism for many, many months, or of the past 4 years during this hamstring struggle.
Yeah. So speaking of Texas A&M, I know one gal you're excited to see a thing move, and not only broke the under 20 world record, but set a collegiate indoor record at this past weekend's SEC Indoor Championship. What did you think of that?
Oh my gosh, that was so incredible to watch. And the Aggie Track Instagram posted less than a 2-minute video, but 158 of it was only of her running, and it was just so incredible to watch. She looked, as my old college coach would say, smooth as silk. It was beautiful, and I'm just so impressed with, as we talked about earlier, how every single event in American distance running for on the women's side has really stepped up their game over the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like these athletes are getting faster and faster and faster, and I just wonder. I just wonder whether you're in college or as a professional now. Do you ever think you were at a disadvantage, either A, shoe wise, or B, maybe somebody knowingly or unknowingly doped?
Uh, no. So shoe wise, do that's an interesting debate. Do I think the shoes are much, much better now? Yes, definitely. All of the shoes, and I will wear them, as I think everyone else should if they're available. But I definitely think that there's an advantage to wearing them. However, I say that with, I don't think that I was disadvantaged as a high school or college athlete, because I think that really all the records being broken across the board is really more a testament to the athlete's mind. I think that the mind is so powerful, and once you see other people doing something, it just puts it on a different perspective, and you decide that, well, shoot, I can do that too. And once 2 minutes for an 800 is run, well, why not? 159 is only 1 second faster. Why not? And then suddenly 158. Well, why not? And so I think it's really just a testament to um the athlete's mind and perspective of deciding that they're going to do something. And also coaches, and coaches, not that coaching is necessarily better, but for the female side, I think that there's a lot more education on what females can both handle and what constitutes a healthy female. Um, because a fit female athlete and a healthy female athlete is not the same thing. And for a long time, I think coaches and athletes focused on attaining peak fitness rather than peak health. And fitness can come without health, but health is the only sure way for sustained fitness and longevity in this sport, which is ultimately what's going to break records. And so I think that more athletes, professional athletes, speaking out about what it means to be a healthy female athlete has really helped the younger generation prioritize their health over fitness, which in the long run ultimately leads to greater fitness gains. So I think that that's also been a cultural shift that has been great for the younger generation.
And I think it also helps you that these kids today have got role models, whether it's Shelby Houlihan, Jenny Simpson, Carol Goucher, who on the men's side, whether it be an Evan Jager or some of these guys just running, breaking records. I mean, Grant Holloway set the indoor world record in the 60-meter hurdles. I mean, it just seems like no matter what sport you're in, these guys are everybody's running and jumping higher, faster than we've ever seen. So we're just in a good time to be an American track and field athlete, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that's been great about social media is having access to seeing what these athletes who are doing such phenomenal things, but both what they're doing training wise and on the magic day. So you see that magic day and that magic time and you think I can do that too, but then you see what they're doing on a daily basis and they seem like normal people and they're just putting in the work day in and day out and staying consistent. And uh the younger generation can see themselves in that older athlete, and it just opens up their mind of what their possible limits are as well.
So my last two questions are: one, if Tokyo can successfully host the summer's Olympic Games, what race will you be paying the most attention to?
Marathon for sure. I love the marathon and cannot wait until I can run or race one on my own with two healthy hamstrings. And so, yeah, definitely excited for that one.
Yeah, so you think that Ali, Molly, or Sally could medal? Because I know you saw Molly run that half marathon in Atlanta, right?
Yeah, I did. That was great. Um, that is a great question. I'm not going to project right now because the thing with the marathon is, I mean, there's so much. It's when and it's the reason I love the marathon so much is it's not only what happens on that day, it's not only how healthy an athlete's mind and body are on that day, but it's such a consequence of what the last 6 months and 6 months plus have looked like, that the marathon in those 2 hours, 3 hours, however long it takes, there's such a story that unfolds that we don't even know. And so, are they talented enough to medal? Yes. Are they going to? Well, shoot, I hope so. It really depends on how these next few months look for them physically and mentally. They have to be um, peak shape physically and mentally and be ready on the day for six plus months to give themselves a shot, which is, it's not just them, anyone does.
And plus, with Valley just having a baby, I mean, you wonder how long it'll be until she's running long distances.
Yeah, that's going to be an exciting journey to watch. So happy for her for taking that. I think that that's such an inspiration for all female runners. Yeah, that announcement was such a happy celebration.
Yeah, and in a year of so much turmoil, having a bit of goodness is what we need. So my last question is, we all like to eat, whether runners, athletes, or the everyday person, we all like to eat. So what's your go-to meal the night before and the morning of a race?
Okay. Um, so I'll tell you, but I mean, disclaimer, it's not, I mean, because it's right before a race, it's not super sexy. You got to stay safe on the day before and the day before a race. Um, so the for dinner, I try not to be too, in high school I was probably more picky, would really want to make sure I had that pasta meal right before. And if that's available, that's fine now, but I try not to be so picky now because whenever I travel, I can't always control what's going to be available. Something that I actually really started to like for pre-race is a huge um salad with so tons of greens and chicken on top, so plenty of protein and like nuts and cheese, just like a nice bomb salad, and then a huge plate of sweet potato fries with it. So I like getting greens the night before so that whenever I wake up, because I try and keep them in my diet consistently, and so that's just staying on my consistent routine, and when I wake up, make sure I have no digestive issues. But then I really load up on the sweet potato fries the night before. Definitely a go-to. The morning before, um, usually plenty of water and noon for hydration, coffee because caffeine is a must, and then picky bars settle really well on my stomach, and bananas. So picky bars, banana, that's usually my go-to the morning of an early race if I have like that early morning race.
Surprised you didn't say oatmeal because it seems like all the other runners I've interviewed like oatmeal.
Yeah, I do. I love oatmeal. The problem with and I don't have a problem with oatmeal actually, but it's just because I'm now traveling for most of my races, it's so much easier to know that I can bring my picky bars and have them picky bars and bananas are always available to me versus oatmeal where I don't know if like my peanut butter or my berries or there will be a microwave or anything. It's just more stressful making sure that that's ready versus having it already out.
Yeah, go what's comfortable with you, right? You can always, yeah, I can always find a protein ball somewhere in the town, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or just bring one, right?
Right, exactly.
So thank you for hopping on the podcast, and I think the cat just won the 1500.
The what?
I think the cat just won the 1500.
Oh my gosh. My cat behind me. Yes, as soon as he's in bed all day, but then as soon as I'm making any activity, he wants a part of the action. So he was definitely making a cameo appearance throughout this entire podcast.
Thinking of photobombing cats, all we need, right? Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.